for the independent institutions in this state. I'm their strongest advocate. The team here is their strongest advocate. And to ensure that the public policymakers understand the needs of private independent institutions.
Welcome to Small College America, a podcast dedicated to exploring the role and value of small colleges in the higher education landscape. I'm Kent Barnds, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dean Hoke.
Kent, it's always a pleasure to be on, and welcome to Bloomington today here, where we just had our first little snow of the season. However, I don't believe our guest is having any snow today. She's out in sunny California, and her name is Kristen Soares. She's the fourth president of the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, representing more than 85 nonprofit institutions dedicated to the public good. As president, she works with the leaders across the state to help shape higher education policy and serves as the sector's chief spokesperson. Under her leadership, she has partnered with AICCU, with the California Community College Chancellor's Office, to help implement the associate degree for transfer pathway, which is expanding opportunities and improving access for transfer students. She also plays a prominent role in the statewide and national education leadership. She serves a member in a number of roundtables and associations for California, as well as NAICU State Executives Council. She spent nearly 25 years at Southern California. And I found this interesting about you, Kristen. Your career started in higher education as a work study student, if I got that right. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Very good.
Work study at the University of Southern California, and it was that job I had on campus that led me to where I am today and what I do today.
And that is a fantastic introduction in terms of seeing a work study student who went into the career, worked for Southern Cal, is now doing this. And by the way, she also, during her tenures, led government and civic engagement efforts across California and in Washington, D.C. She's earned her bachelor's degree in public administration from USC. And Kristen, we are delighted to have you on Small College America.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, welcome, Kristen. For those who may not be familiar, could you start by telling us a little bit about the role of the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities and how it supports its member institutions? And since you're just coming off of a pretty important week, we'd also love to know a little bit about the top legislative priorities for the association in this coming session.
Excellent. I'm happy to. So AICCU, we just celebrated our 70th anniversary.
Wow.
So 70 years of collaboration, 70 years of advocacy on behalf of California's independent nonprofit, all WASC accredited institutions. These institutions are incredibly diverse, and what I like to say is they span all the way from the border of Mexico to the north part of the state in Oregon. So we are located in regions up and down the state. AICCU, our mission and purpose is pretty simple. It's to be we're the unified voice for independent colleges and universities. And as that unified voice, we advocate for policies that expand student access and affordability. And we protect and strengthen financial aid programs like Cal Grants, Pell Grants, so that students can attend our institutions, afford to attend our institutions. And then we convene and support our member institutions so that they can better serve students. So you asked about how we do this and how we support our member institutions. We mainly support them by giving them the tools that they need in order to advocate on their behalf and to advocate on behalf of the sector for those policies that are important to institutions to be able to deliver on their mission. And part of that is we do data, we do research, we do joint communications, and we can talk more about that later. But really where we are and where we've been centered this past year, and really since the beginning of our 70 years, is advocacy for policies. So you asked about our legislative priorities. And as you can imagine, a state like the size of California, fourth largest economy, it's a very active state as far as legislation goes. There's, over 2,500 bills more that are introduced every year. There's a biannual session, so every 2 years we have a session, and we are engaged on student financial aid. We're engaged on policies that impact our institutions as a set of employers. We're engaged on Title IX issues. And since this administration, the new federal administration, California's been very proactive about, services to protect undocumented students. It's been really a myriad of bills. Happy to talk more, but I do want to say we're also very engaged in Washington. We need to be. It's just what we saw with HR 1 and the cuts made to student financial aid. We're unpacking that and thinking about, what are we going to do in order to come back to what I first said, which is we're here to, expand student access and affordability.
No shortage of priorities, that's for sure. Dean,
No.
I'll turn to you.
Well, speaking of legislation and speaking about states, California really does have one of the most complex and frankly influential higher education ecosystems in the country. I mean, you have the University of California system, you have the Cal State system, and of course the independent sector, each serving a very distinctive mission. I mean, how does AICCU advocate for independent colleges within this type of landscape? And what are the opportunities or challenges that arise in coordinating with state agencies and legislatures?
Such a good question, Dean. And California is a very, the higher education ecosystem, it's vibrant, and it's really vibrant because of the strong public sectors and institutions that we have. And as you said, you see the California State University system and the California community colleges, and then you have the independent colleges. And not as a fourth segment, but really independent colleges have been, critical and a part of this ecosystem since really the beginning of California. So the first set of institutions to be here to deliver higher education. So we take that role and responsibility really, it's important, and it's really what sets the framework of how we work with our public sector partners. California is a big state. We have a lot of students, and we all need to work together to serve these students and to have the pathways and to have the programs to deliver upon, the sectors that this economy needs in California to survive and grow. And so what that makes me think about too is the master plan for higher education. We all have heard about the master plan, California's master plan. And it really set up those segments. And what I think people don't know is it also really set the role for independent colleges and universities. We don't speak about it a lot, but if you read, and I've read the master plan and all the iterations since then, but in that original master plan, there was an oversight committee that oversaw all the committees that looked at enrollment. They looked at how we're going to serve students, what the public sectors will do or not do. And the chair of that committee was the president of an independent college and university.
Really?
Yes. So we were really intrinsically involved in setting up this master plan. And when you hear about the three legs of the stool of the master plan, UC, CSU, community colleges, there's really four legs to the stool. So it's us as well. We're the fourth leg. And I will argue that four legs on a stool will always make it stronger. So we have to work with our public partners, our public institution partners, to meet the challenges. And I like what you said, challenges and opportunities. There have been a lot of challenges this we've talked about, but there's a lot of opportunities for us to come together too.
Well, kind of going down that path just a little bit more. I mean, you're working together, you're doing a number of things with the four-legged philosophy. At the same time, I would assume, and I don't know this for fact, I'm assuming you're really competing private colleges for students and enrollment, as well as the state systems, as well as the community college system, which I would think is quite a challenge, particularly for your 85 institutions. How do you see that? I know you see cooperation, but also there is an advocacy side to this and for those independent schools.
Mhm.
What's your perception?
We're in a very public-centric state with these three very large public college and university systems. But if you look at the 87 member institutions of AICCU and where they're embedded in their communities, they are really important providers of higher education in this state. And quite frankly, competition makes us stronger. And we are competitors. Even my 87 member institutions are competitors. But you mentioned in the introduction, I came from USC. And when I started at USC, I worked for President Stephen Sample, who was just an extraordinary leader and president. And he spoke about competition a lot and in higher education, and that it wasn't always a negative thing, but the competition can make us better and does make us better. Ultimately, I believe in California, there are enough students. We have enough students. What we need to think about is how we best serve those students. And some are going to be better served at a public institution, and some are going to be better served in an independent institution. So what we have to work towards together is how we best serve those students and what does student success look like. But that's where AICCU comes in. I'm the advocate for the independent institutions in this state. I'm their strongest advocate. The team here is their strongest advocate. And to ensure that the public policymakers understand the needs of private independent institutions. We need strong, vibrant sectors. We really need our sector to be strong and vibrant.
Very good.
I love the emphasis on the sector overall and the way that California is approaching this. Our focus in this podcast is small colleges. We think that that's such an important part of the ecosystem. And among your 87 institutions you represent, there are several small colleges. Many small colleges today are rethinking their academic portfolios to meet both changing student but also workforce demands. What innovations or program changes or models are you seeing that allow small colleges to balance tradition with transformation and ability to preserve that independent institutional identity?
Thank you for that question. As you said, several of our member institutions are small colleges, and they play this just incredibly, I think you heard the word unique role, but really important role within their communities. And what we know of our colleges and universities, that many of their students come from, a nearby. You hear place bound, but they're really serving the students within their community. And I think that's important because you talked about or asked about innovation. I think small colleges just have to be ready to pivot and have to be ready to expand and grow those programs that meet the unique needs of their communities. I think we also know that higher educations can sometimes be slow to change. But what I'm seeing is, I think, maybe a more rapid response to what the needs are, what the jobs are needed, what the pathways are needed. And this is done through partnership with their local businesses, through their boards, listening. There's traditional liberal arts, and that liberal arts education is incredibly important. But I think what we're hearing is it's that liberal arts and that preparation, but also what job it leads to. And I think that's where the role of AICCU comes in too, right? We convene our leaders about what is taking place. What are we hearing? We need more nurses. We know that we need more The clinical mental health care workforce needs to dramatically expand. And small colleges they're an important provider in that. These are pathway programs to graduate programs, right? So this is creating that ecosystem. I mean, in California right now, our segment is preparing about 92% of the clinical workforce. So we're all part of this. So this is part of the small colleges, graduate-only colleges, our larger colleges really coming together and thinking about, pathway and programs. Does that answer your question? I feel like
It actually, I mean, it really does, right? I mean, this is another example that just because independent colleges have that independent nature, the sensitivity to who they're educating, the community's need, that transcends institution type. And I also really appreciated your emphasis on the agility factor, that many times smaller colleges, given the size and bureaucracy of some larger places, have that agility to make the pivot, as you described it, a little bit quicker than other institutions. So that was great. Thank you.
Well, Kristen, let's kind of continue down that general path, and particularly as the world has changed and we're seeing more and more, I think, questions about college affordability. I hear a lot about ROIs, one of the famous words being used quite a bit. They love that. But I'm very curious about how should small colleges articulate their value proposition, particularly to skeptical families that are looking at it and going, you have a higher price. What's the affordability? Why is this a good idea? And at the same time, are you seeing more independent colleges, and particularly small colleges, that are looking at alternative business models or revenue streams that show promise for helping them achieve longer term financial sustainability?
Well, on the affordability piece, Dean,
Yeah.
small colleges, medium colleges, large colleges, we don't talk about affordability or that clearly. And especially for independent colleges, right? That tuition price,
Yeah.
it's high. It's higher than our public institutions. We don't have subsidies by our state. So that tuition is really reflective of what it costs to deliver a higher education. And I think we need to really talk about this is an investment. It is expensive. It is,
Yeah.
but it's worth it. And that is this whole value discussion right now, as you said, right? Is the return on investment worth it? And there's a lot of people saying it's not. And there's been massive disinvestment, especially at the federal level, into higher education, into this enterprise. And we're going to have to come together to really talk about the affordability. And I think really have a reckoning that this is expensive. And this is why it's expensive. And I wish I could say it's going to become less expensive, but it's not. This is an industry ultimately that is very labor intensive. And we all know this, right? At the highest level, PhDs who are teaching, these are highly educated people, highly compensated individuals, as they should be. But it means that our labor force is very expensive. And we have systems in place around student success. That means it's people intensive. And, I think we just need to be very clear about how we talk about this, because it's really up to higher education with partners to talk about that return on investment and why it is worth it. And that is something AICCU just launched recently. It's on our website, but it's called the Worth It campaign.
Tell us a little bit
So
about this. I'm
worth
curious.
it.
Yeah.
Higher education, it is absolutely worth it. And it is worth it for the attainment of your education to a degree, to a job. It's worth it, we know, for, just, so those are economic reasons, but the social reasons, If you graduate with a degree, you're more likely to be involved in your community. So think about the societal impact of that. If you graduate with a degree, you're more likely to vote. Think about the importance of that, especially right now. You have better health outcomes because, you go through that process of like, of, in higher education where you're expanding and learning as an undergrad. So you have inquiry. So inquiry into your health. So the impacts and of a higher education degree are just uh, incredible, really incredible. And we just realized that we have to talk about it and we need to share. We need to be the messengers about saying why this is worth it. And it can be us talking or it can be about the students who graduated. So if you go to the website, we have student testimonials and they're really powerful. And they're telling the story about why it's worth it. So I hope people listen to this podcast, look at that website and think about how they can use that at their institution and use that with their partners, because we all need to lift this message up together. I believe it's so critically important, especially right now, because we have to change this narrative.
Yeah. Ken?
Appreciate that message a great deal and can't wait to take a look at your website and see some of those testimonials and messaging. I hope this is not going to be a tricky question, but higher education is facing increased political scrutiny really across the country for a whole host of reasons. How do you advise independent college leaders to communicate their value and relevance to the public and to policymakers in today's polarized environment? There's kind of this demand for a statement a day to react to the broader political environment. And I'm sure that you, as coordinating these 87 independent partners, probably have a little bit of experience helping folks walk a tightrope.
Last week I said we had our annual meeting and I opened the meeting with, if I had to capture higher education in 2025 in a single word, it would be unprecedented. Not a word I like to use a lot. It's often overused, but this year it just felt entirely appropriate because of those political influences and factors that you just talked about, Kent. And my response to that is to my institution leaders and presidents is you have to be in the state house and you have to be on the Hill and with your local elected officials. Like that relationship is so incredibly important right now. These policymakers are making decisions that impact how we operate as a set of institutions and how an institution is able to operate and thrive. So it is so important to have these relationships. If I were ever to say, like, this is the year to advocate, this is the year to develop those relationships, this is absolutely the year. Because if you're not informing what is really taking place, what the needs of your institution are, someone else will fill that space. Someone else will. And so this is the time to be engaged and develop those relationships. And if you look at HR1, that's a really good example, right? You had the House version and then you had the Senate version. The House version would have been much worse for higher education, and the Senate version prevailed. Still, there's a lot of changes in that bill that are going to have negative impacts. The elimination of Grad Plus.
Yep.
We're going to feel that in a couple of years when employers all of a sudden understand these key workforce nurses, PAs, you name it, aren't able to go into those programs because they can't afford it. But they need to hear from us and they need to hear from us. They need to hear from the institution presidents and their boards directly. Here's what happened. This is why it matters. Let me tell you how this is really working. So it's being in the state house, it's being on the Hill, but it's also having policymakers and elected officials on campus. So they touched and feel and experience, what an institution is doing, right? It's the education of students, but it's also these institutions in their communities. And as providers of programs, and I don't want to call them safety net programs, but these are really important if you think about after school programs. And then you think about teacher preparation. I'm thinking about partnerships with K through 12 and how critical that is. And one thing I know is policymakers care about that, care about the role of these institutions. But again, we have to keep them informed. And it's constant, like any good relationship, you're constantly working at it. Can't take it for granted ever.
I know Dean's got a last question, but what I appreciate about your response is it's about all 87 of your members engaging in order to help influence public policy. It's not just having somebody great like you who can coordinate and advise and enjoys relationship, but it's really mobilizing all of your members to be involved in advocacy. So really appreciate that response.
Thank you.
Well, going to the last question, which is a very traditional question for us, and we've asked it, I think, of just about everybody that we have interviewed over the past year and a half, and that's about the future. So you get the crystal ball on this, and if your crystal ball is working, I wish you well, but I'd like to have some advice and some of your thoughts. What do you think the environment's going to look like, let's say, in the next 5 years? And particularly, not only just for the small colleges, but also for higher education in general. What do you see? How do you vision it out?
Mm. Oh, I like this question because I think about the future a lot. And what I've recently just said to institution leaders is these are incredibly challenging times, more so than ever, I think. I just use the word unprecedented. But we will come out of this because with every great challenge, right, there becomes an opportunity. And higher education, when I talked about it as an industry, if you really think about it, there's 4 like surviving industries since what I call the beginning of time. But if you think about from the 16th century, I want to go way back. It's banks, it's governments, it's higher education institutions, and religion, churches. So we will be here. We are so important to the fabrics of our communities, of our states, of this country. And higher education is a through line in so many ways. And so this is a time for us to really come together, speak together, and really preserve, higher education writ large. And what I mean by that is this is a time to talk about the importance of this work we do. And we have to get it right. A lot of people rely upon us. And it's not just the students we serve, but it's the communities we serve. And I'll go back to what I said about 87 colleges located in California, up and down the state. This is really important to the communities within the state that are very diverse. And if you look across the country, we're an incredibly rich, diverse country. And I believe higher education is a powerful way to set the trajectory of so many programs, policy, government. And this is a really long answer, but I just really think about where we are right now as a democracy. And higher education is foundational to democracy. So we have to get it right and work together.
Right.
Well, what a great way to conclude our conversation. We do have to get it right and we have to work together. So, Kristen, thank you for joining us and for sharing your insights into California's independent higher education community and the issues facing small colleges there and nationwide. For those listening or viewing, if you'd like to learn more about Small College America, please go to our webpage at www.smallcollegeamerica.net, where you can find details on upcoming episodes, contact us, and even suggest topics you'd like us to cover. This episode of Small College America is made possible with underwriting support from EDU Alliance Group, a higher education consulting firm that champions small colleges and the communities they serve. On behalf of our guest, Kristen Soares, and my co-host, Dean Hoke, and myself, Kent Barnds, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
There we go. Thank